I have only read his books, and Ritvik sent it to me, like 18 Days of the War and the Last Moments of Bhagwan Krishna. That is because they are translated. But he had also written a book on the dating of Mahabharata. How many of you know that? Now we are discussing that afternoon. The whole afternoon I spent with Narayanacharya. He just goes like grilling me essentially. He says, "Tell me this verse. How do you interpret this? This is from Mahabharata. And how about this? What about Bhishma on the bed of arrows? So you are saying 58 is not correct. Why do you say so?" And we just go through it. And then same thing came here the next day or a day after. We had a function here, or I mean here meaning in the auditorium. And even when the function is over and I was running to the airport, he was 83 years old about that time and on a wheelchair, especially while traveling. So when he comes out, he just stops me. I'm running to the airport. He says, "I have quick questions. You also say Rama's age at the time he left for Vanvas is 17. But aren't there references in Valmiki Ramayana that it is says 25? And he quotes the verses for 25, and this was something fun. I mean, few people were watching, and I quote for the 17, and he said, "Yes, but they both are in Valmiki Ramayana. Why did you choose 17? And I just gave us some simple example, specific example. Again, I will not go into the details. And his face goes like a child in a candy store. He says, "Ah, I get it. I get it." I'm going to talk about my interaction with Professor K.S. Narayanacharya. The linchpin that connects me with Professor Narayanacharya is sitting right on the podium. That is Ritvik Subramanya. I met him about 7 years ago. That is Narayanacharya. I came to know about him about 7 years ago. Actually, I met him in 2020. Right here in Bengaluru, maybe not the same auditorium. And just before that, I also had a personal meeting with him. But it is really Ritvik who introduced me to Professor K.S. Narayanacharya. I had published my 3 books in America as self-published books. And if you read them, they still exist. They don't have a foreword, for example. Because when I wrote my first book, and just imagine a plastic salesperson writing a book on Mahabharata and astronomy. So somebody said, "Oh, you need also a foreword." And I said, "Okay, who's supposed to write a foreword?" And he said, "Someone that understands what you have written, someone who is an expert in that field, someone who can intelligently critique it, someone that you can respect, and someone preferably also agrees with you." This is 2011 and I couldn't find anyone around the world. So I said, I don't need a foreword. That happened the same thing with my second book 2014 and same thing happened with my third book 2018. And then comes Ritvik. He just wrote, I think number of you heard that yesterday, he just wrote a Facebook post saying, "Sir, your books are too costly in India. Can I publish it?" And he told yesterday the part that he remembers. I'll tell you a little bit that I remember. So I said, "Yes, you can." And still I don't know who he is. Then he said, he can correct me, of course. But he said, "Sir, what are your expectations?" I said, take these books to every household, every Indian household. Take these books to every college library, university library, IITs, IIMs, etc. And he said, "Sir, consider it done." And since then, he has essentially taken these all over. Now, when he published the Indian version of that book, he said, "You don't have a foreword to your book when you self-published." I said, "These are the considerations someone told me." And he said, "Well, I know someone." And that was Professor K.S. Narayanacharya. So Professor Narayanacharya wrote a foreword to my first book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen, when it was published in India. Again, it's out there, and if you want to read, even if you don't want to read my book, that's perfectly fine. But do read the foreword. And then for the Ramayana, I'll come to that at the end of my speech. But then fast forward to 2020, it's a magical number, by the way. 2nd February 2020. You see the magic in it? 22202022. And so just few days before, just 2 days before that, he again put me on the back of his scooty or whatever it was. And I don't know where I'm going. So I say, where are we going? He says, we are going. And we go to meet Professor Narayanacharya. And Ganeshji mentioned like how Narayanacharya was critical. Aurobindo was his inspiration, but he's also critical of Aurobindo. And well, that's how a researcher needs to be. That's how a person needs to be. Critical and criticism and critique. Sometimes people confuse those things. Okay, we have to separate the grains from the chaff. That's what Brahma Bindu Upanishad also tells me. As soon as we entered, so there were few people sitting there discussing with Narayanacharya. I also wanted to join this. He says, no, come here. And he made me sit where he was sitting, the bed or the desk that we had. And there was no time wasted, no time spent on formalities. They immediately said, I have a question for you. I have one question for you. And I'm saying, no, what is going to be the question? And I don't know if I'm going to have an answer. He said, what do you think of Bhairappa's Parva? Now, I'm not going to spend time telling you what I told him about what I think of Bhairappa's Parva. But whatever I said, immediately he held my hand and he said, you and me are on the same page. We agree. And then we went on through his different library, different rooms, and he was instructing Ritvik something in Kannada every time, and I'm just trying to figure out what that means. And then very interestingly, the number of you who have visited his place, you would know he had 3 desks. One desk where he would sit down and write things in English. In another room, another desk, he would write things in Kannada, and a third desk, Tamil, correct? Current affairs. So there was a third desk that he would sit and write things in that. And of course, those of you have seen it, those books are open, he is writing, and he would not put a pen to the paper unless the entire statement is clear in his mind. There are no words that he has scratched at all. That's how it is. And then he was telling Ritvik something, and what I understood, because I would look at him, and he said, Ritvik would tell me, go sit in that chair. So I sit in that chair, then I go to the next room again. So whatever that Narayanacharya thought at the time, he wanted me to sit in all 3 chairs in the 3 rooms at that time. What is interesting is that day also, of course, he had understood my Mahabharata work, and therefore he had written the foreword. But number of you may know, and I have not read it because my limitation is the language. I have only read his books, and Ritvik sent it to me, like 18 Days of the War and the last moments of Bhagwan Krishna. That is because they are translated. But he had also written a book on the dating of Mahabharata. How many of you know that? Okay, and so there, like many others have done it, because connected with the traditional understanding of Kali Yuga. So therefore, he had connected that with, like many traditionalists have done, 3102 BC. Now, it takes a great courage where you put a pen to the paper, you establish a thesis, and then you see something better and you deviate yourself from it. If you have heard the name of Ken Robinson, if you have not, you can go to TED Talks and type TED Talks Ken Robinson, educator. He says it's not necessary that you have to be wrong to do something revolutionary or be a revolutionary. But unless you are willing to be wrong, you cannot do anything revolutionary in life. And that was Professor K.S. Narayanacharya. I also had another guru, Dr. P.V. Vartak, and his story was same. In fact, you should start thinking. He had published a book showing the date of Mahabharata to be 5561 BCE. That's more than 7,500 years ago, as early as 1980. And then I essentially come up to the same date in 2011. Okay, so now you should start wondering, how many of you understand Marathi, or Konkani people will possibly understand. Maybe you can translate afterwards. So you should actually ask, so if Vartak had figured this out in 1980 and I figured out the same thing in 2011, in Marathi people would ask me, or actually they do ask, so Nilesh, mग तुम्ही काय दिवे लावले? Okay, so what exactly did you do? And then you have to read it. But fast forward to Narayanacharyaji's and also Dr. Vartak. Then Dr. Vartak has also done work on the Ramayana. So it's 2012. I go to meet Dr. Vartak in Pune. And so after this discussion on Mahabharata, I tell him, Dr. Vartak, I have figured out the date of Mahabharata, so the date of Ramayana. And he said, please tell me, because he had also proposed 7300 BCE. And I tell him, mine is very different than his. So he says, please tell me. So I tell 12,209 BCE. You can see that book out there. And this was the same discussion flavor that I had with the case Narayanacharya. He says, tell me, how did you figure this out? I'll not waste your time in details. But I tell him a certain shlok, and he goes like this, this is Dr. Vartak. And fast forward now to 2020. Now we are discussing that afternoon, the whole afternoon I spent with Narayanacharya. He just goes like grilling me, essentially. He says, tell me this verse, how do you interpret this? This is from Mahabharata. And how about this? What about Bhishma on the bed of arrows? So you are saying 58 is not correct. Why do you say so? And we just go through it. And then same thing came here the next day or a day after. We had a function here, here meaning in the auditorium. And even when the function is over and I was running to the airport, he was 83 years old about that time and on a wheelchair, especially while traveling. So when he comes out, he just stops me. I'm running to the airport. He says, I have quick questions. You also say Rama's age at the time he left for Vanvas is 17. But aren't there references in Valmiki Ramayana that it is says 25? And he quotes the verses for 25, and this was something fun. Few people were watching, and I quote for the 17, and he said, yes, but they both are in Valmiki Ramayana. Why did you choose 17? And I just gave us some simple example, specific example. Again, I will not go into the details. And his face goes like a child in a candy store. He says, I get it. Now I'll tell you, I read Bhagavad Gita and somebody said, now read Upanishad. I tried to read Upanishad and I was bored to death. Now this is many years ago. But when you meet people like Narayanacharya, you start even understanding Upanishad. For example, Bhruttahari, in his, what is the book? He says, if you meet the great realized people, and their random talk is basically what defines the Shastra. Yastesha swaira kathasta eva bhavanti shastrani. So when I met likes of Narayanacharya, I understood this. And just I want to end on something and then to tell you something about the Ashirvachan that he gave to my second book, that is on the Ramayana. But in Brihad Aranyak Upanishad, there is a guideline for the people who are into sadhana and they become a siddha. But even when you are a siddha, as long as you are in the body, there are certain norms that you must follow. It goes something like this, Tasmat Brahmana. Brahmana in the sense of a jnani. He says, Tasmat Brahmana. So now the person who is a jnani, how he or she should behave. Pandityam nirvidya balyena tishtase. So one thing is to have the erudition, but can you digest it? Can you assimilate it and not wear a chip on the shoulder? And live like a child. Balyena tishtase. That was Narayanacharya. Now it goes further. It says you have to even digest this together. Pandityam cha balyam cha nirvidya atha muni. Amaunam cha maunam cha nirvidya atha brahmana. Then he is a true realized soul. If we have a time, we will show a small clip that he gave me as a Ashirvachan. Again, the linchpin is Ritvik. And my namaskaram to Narayanacharya. And also congratulations and greetings to the awardee, the Samman in the name of K.S. Narayanacharya. Namaskar.
Dear Nilesh Opji, I am very proud of your two books being published by my esteemed friend, Mr. Ritvik Subramaniam. The books have come up well and more. Your incisive readings into the two great national epics have taken me by, what shall I say, surprise is too small a word. Your capacity to penetrate into astronomical details scattered over both Ramayana and Mahabharata have left me breathless almost. I am an avid reader and discourse on these two ethics have delivered thousands of lectures, no doubt, but from a different ethical, moral, spiritual angle. You have pinpointed the exact dates on which these events happen. For example, although I knew Dasharatha describes his horoscopical positions to Rama just before the exile. Having announced the coronation of Rama, Dasharatha calls his son back and says, Trishankuhu, Lohitangaha, our forefathers, they are not well placed in the zodiacal positions. Of course, I have read the commentary by Govind Raja, who is a master in astrology also. But your width combined with the Indian wisdom and the Western mode of approach to these things is something. I think you have galloped extremely fast, leaving all other researchers far behind you. My great appreciations for your endeavor, and for a very, very long time, as you have said earlier, nobody will challenge you. If they challenge you, they have to be greater than you, which I doubt will never happen. May God bless you. May God bless you.